Now, modern science is divergent. Divergent. It means every branch of modern science is going off in a different direction. Now, this is quite interesting because modern science really do want to have what they call the grand unified field theory. They would like to all come together into one theory, but they cannot. They've gone off in all different directions. It's divergent. Look at it this way. Mechanics, Newton's laws, physical mechanics, that's one direction of science. But then you've got electrical theory, electrical engineering, looking at electricity. Well, that's gone off in another direction. Magnetism, you're looking at magnetic forces. That's going off another direction. Now we've got quantum physics. That's going off in another direction. But you've got relativity, Einstein's relativity, general relativity. That's gone off in another direction, talking about gravity. But then you look at other branches of science, chemistry. Well, chemistry is something different again. That's gone off in another direction. Even biology, something totally different. That's another direction. And they don't really even talk about consciousness, the mind or the soul. The closest we've got to that is psychology, and that's gone off in another direction. So they're all different branches of science going off in all different directions, and they never come back together. You see, a real science will be convergent. All the different branches of science will all come back together into one single unified theory. Now, they do want that. Okay, modern physics, they still talk about the grand unified field theory. They would like to explain everything in one theory, one formula, but they just can't do it. Now, that doesn't mean it cannot be done. It just means modern science is severely misguided. It's gone off at a tangent. It's now missing the point. And the reason it's missing the point is that the guiding principle of modern science, at least, the last 100 years or so, has been money. Science is no longer philosophy. It is engineering, and all engineering is to do with making money. It's not about discovering the answers of the universe. It's about how do we make more money. So really, they're only branching off into engineering, trying to work out, there's another phenomena here. How can we look at this phenomena, analyze this phenomena, and use it to make money? That's what they're doing. Now, I'm saying that really we want a science that explains all phenomena. We need a unified science, a convergent science, where all the branches come back together into one place. And that's what I'm talking about on this channel, ether physics. The ether is convergent. Everything comes from the ether. So this to me is already a superior science, the ether physics. But it's been dismissed, like I said, in the last 100 years because very difficult to make any money out of it. How do you make money? Well, again, this is still quite a misguided idea, because if we understood the true nature of the universe, if we understood this convergent science, well, that would open the doors to more technology. More technology does mean more engineering, which does mean maybe you could make more money. But the interesting thing is this convergent science, ether physics, it's more powerful, and it leads towards technology like free energy. So free energy, it's very difficult to make money because it's now free. We can all just have it. How do you make money out of it? So this convergent science, ether physics, has been suppressed. And the science we've been given is divergent, off in all different angles. Now, the ancient people looking at science, they were more holistic. You see, the ether is an ancient idea. Now, if we look at the universe And we have to look at the universe with an open mind. What have we got? Well, we've got two things that are very hard to deny. We all must agree. We have got matter, material substances. And this matter seems to follow the laws of physics. But we don't really know what the laws of physics are. Again, we have created a divergent science looking at different phenomena and then creating laws about them. But those laws don't seem to come together, so they cannot be complete. And on the other side, we have got spirit, consciousness, the soul. The soul. And we have to acknowledge the soul because it's a real phenomena. Consciousness is a real phenomena. And there's enough evidence, there's plenty of evidence for people that have life after death experiences. There's so many people now have properly died, come back and told us an experience. There is real evidence for life after death. That's the first thing. We must acknowledge that. The second thing in consciousness I've already talked about is we've got something that is called imagination. Imagination is phenomenal because imagination is infinite. Now, to imagine infinite different ideas, that is so phenomenal that it has to be a phenomena in its own right. That has got to be purely inside consciousness, not physical, because imagination is not reality, but we can imagine everything, anything. So imagination is not reality, but it is real. It's a function of consciousness. And consciousness then has this infinite capability of imagination. And furthermore, as well as life after death, imagination, we've also got psychic phenomena. There's enough evidence of psychic phenomena that has been observed, analysed, studied. We know that all the three-letter agencies, the secret agencies, the shadow state, they've all done experiments into psychic phenomena, telepathy, telekinesis. All this sort of stuff, they've done it. Why? It's a real phenomena. You cannot deny it. However, the science that is presented to us is still just this divergent science. So people know, yeah, there's more going on. We've got to acknowledge two things: consciousness, the soul, the spirit, and matter, material substance. And it's very interesting because if you look at ancient philosophies, they talked about the soul. They all acknowledged the soul, but they were also trying to analyze and understand matter. And the old word for the soul, ancient word, is ATMA. Sanskrit word ATMA, the soul, the spirit, consciousness. But we've also got the atom, material substance. So the word atom must have come from the word Atma. Atma is the older word, but they're so similar. So it means that there was an idea of a convergent science, the Atma and the atom, the soul and material substance. They must still be the same thing. So how can we bring these two things together into a unified science? Well, if we say, let's start at the beginning. Let's say, okay, we want a unified science, a convergent science. Everything comes together into one theory, one model, one explanation. And it must include the soul and it must include matter. It must have the Atma and it must have the atom. How do we bring it together? Well, let's say the universe is comprised of one substance, one thing. Now, we don't know what that one thing is, but let's call that one thing the ether. Ether. And this is a pure fluid substance. Everything is made of this one fluid energy, let's say. Ether. All right, that's an assumption, but let's start from there. So how can we use this ether to describe all phenomena, everything? All branches of science must be explained with this one thing, ether. So how do we do it? Well, let's say this one pure fluid ether. It's fluid. Now, it's pure fluid. It's not like water. See, water is fluid, but it's made up of particles, water molecules. So it behaves like a fluid, but it's not a fluid. It's a fluid made up of particles. But this fluid, the ether, must be a pure fluid. No particles. No particles, just pure fluid. But saying that, we've got atoms. Atoms are particles. So how do we get an atom from this pure fluid? And we've got the soul, the ATMA, consciousness, spirit. How does that come from this pure fluid ether also? Well, let's look at it like this. Let's say we've got this pure fluid ether. But this ether, as pure fluid, has different densities. Different densities. So this fluid can be compacted into a high density. Or this fluid could be rarefied, spread out into low density. It's still the one and the same fluid, ether, but you could have a different density of it. High density, low density. So let's say the very lowest density of this fluid, the very lowest density is very, diffuse. The most lowest density of this fluid ether, let's call that consciousness, the soul. And then you'll have the opposite, very dense, very compact density of this fluid. Let's say this fluid, we could compact it into a density. Then at the highest density of this fluid, we compact it into an atom. Let's say we have an atom. So low density ether is the soul, the spirit, the ATMA. High density ether, let's say, is the atom, a particle. But it's not really a particle, it's simply a compacted high density ether. It's still the same fluid. Now, we can look at this again if we use water as an analogy. Water is water, but water, you've got steam. When water is more diffuse, it spreads out into steam, water vapor. When water is more compact, it freezes down into ice, becomes solid. But it's still water. Now, this is not a perfect analogy because water, we know, is made up of particles, water molecules. So the effects exhibited by water are still based on the water molecule. High energy water, the molecules are spread apart. We have a gas. Lower energy water, they come together in a fluid. Even lower energy water, they crystallize into a solid. But the ether is pure fluid. It's not quite the same. No particles. This is an abstract, conceptual fluid. Pure fluid dynamics. Very hard to wrap your head around this. Again, it's an assumption, a theory, but it's a more powerful theory because it is a convergent theory. It will explain all branches of science. And it will also explain all branches of meta-science. Physics and metaphysics. Both of them. It will explain consciousness and it will explain physical phenomena. And the two must come together. So here I've already done it. Highly diffuse, low density ether, let's call that consciousness. High density ether, let's call that matter. Now, furthermore, let's look at the atom. Well, we know the atom is very small. It's a small particle. But how could we have this particle? Because it can't be something different. We can't say, oh, now we've got a particle, but what is it? What's that particle? Oh, I don't know. No, we have to know, what is it? What's it made from? Well, we know now, again, everyone will agree, everything is energy. And we know now an atom is made up of energy. But we don't know what energy is. There's no definition of energy. It's quite abstract. So if people are complaining about the ether, yeah, the ether, that's nonsense. Yeah, so is energy. There's no real definition of energy either. So we're making up words. They're all making up words. The entire quantum mechanics is made up words. But we treat that like fact. It's not fact. It's just ideas, made up words. And mathematical models trying to justify that idea. But it never converges. Remember, modern science must be wrong because it's divergent. And if you look at it in the last 100 years, we've gone into all these different branches. We've developed amazing technology. But to me, it's still very primitive technology. It's divergent. And it never comes back together. The moment all technology, all science becomes convergent, we will see a different technology arising. So the ether physics is simpler, it's more powerful, and it's closer to reality. Reality must be convergent, single unified theory. So the atom, we know, is very small, but we also know it's made of energy, and the original model of the atom is energy spinning round and round and round. So energy spinning round and round, what is that? Well, still, that is pure fluid. Pure fluid energy spinning round and round creates an atom. So it's still the same fluid. Still the same fluid. But how do we create these little spinning round bubbles or atoms of energy? Well, in high density ether compacts. Inside that high density ether, little bubbles are created. It gets so dense that they start to spin round. Now I'm going to talk more about this in time, explain this in greater detail. But this is how we could explain the creation of an atom. An atom appears from high density ether, being compacted into high pressure. It's still pure fluid, but pure fluid trapped in a little bubble. Imagine it's like this. As the pressure increases, inside that pressure, you have little areas of low pressure, little bubbles. But those bubbles are going to be compacted in. Little bubble compacted. But it can't go anywhere. There's nowhere for it to go. So what happens is, as the energy goes into the bubble, it cannot collapse. It starts to rotate, spin around the bubble, and it creates a little stationary spin. A rotation, spinning around a bubble. And that we can call an atom. And an atom is formed when that rotation has stabilized. So it's a stabilized formation, a little piece of high density ether trapped around a bubble of low density ether. Again, difficult to understand. Now let's look at, so that's an atom, but then what is an ATMA? So an atom, again, is a tiny little bubble, but this will be, again, a sphere, spherical. It has to be geometric because created with high pressure goes into a sphere, a bubble. So high pressure is created spherically. Now an ATMA is low pressure, low density ether. So in low density ether, you're not going to be creating atoms. But in low density ether, low density, so subtle. Let's define it as consciousness itself. Let's just say ether is consciousness. That is it. consciousness. So now low density ether is everywhere, consciousness is everywhere. But occasionally that consciousness increases and increases in density until it increases in so much density it creates an atom. So an atom is still created from consciousness. It's simply high density consciousness trapped in a little bubble spinning around itself. But actual consciousness, a soul, again, I am a soul, a self-aware conscious being. Now, I am an individual. I know that. Again, subjective. This is my own subjective experience. I think, therefore I am. But we all have this shared subjective experience. All of you know, yeah, I'm an individual. I've got my own mind. I have my own thoughts. I have my own experience. So I must be a singularity. I am a singularity of consciousness. So I myself must be a bubble of this consciousness energy, an ATMA. And that goes back to the ancient idea. The ATMA, again, talking about geometry, a sphere, a ball. But they also talked about the ATMA as an egg-shaped. Now, I've talked about the egg before, but the egg is still a fundamental geometry. Sphere, a ball like this, fundamental geometry. And again, geometry is the most important because a sphere is the most efficient geometry for space. But when this geometry spreads out into an egg, it's changing slightly, but an egg is a sphere that has been separated a bit, stretched out a bit, based on the mathematics of the golden ratio. It's a golden ratio. The top part of an egg to the bottom part of an egg is in the proportions of the golden ratio. So an egg is very important fundamental geometry, and I'll talk about that more in time. But it goes back with ancient philosophy of the ATMA. They also thought of it as an egg. But let's just talk of it as a sphere, because we know an atom must be a sphere. So let's say an ATMA is also a sphere. There's a balance. But an ATMA is consciousness. Consciousness is low density ether. Very low density because we can't detect it. But an atom is high density. Yeah, we can detect atoms. But then you've got everything in between. All different energies in between. Light. Light, again, is this different density of energy. Red light is higher density. Violet light is lower density, lower energy. Or rather the other way around, beg your pardon. Violet light is higher energy, higher density. Red light is lower energy, lower density. But an atom, higher and higher and higher density. Super high density light. And consciousness, I've talked about this, consciousness is also light. But very, very low density light. It's so low density you can't even detect it. But it must exist. Okay, low pressure is going to be more spread out, diffuse. Low pressure spreads out. So by that theory, low pressure ether is going outwards to infinity. So the whole universe is going to spread out in this lower pressure ether. Less and less pressure, more and more diffuse. So by that extension, low pressure ether, consciousness is spreading out to the whole universe. And actually what's happening is it's spreading out to infinity. High pressure ether collapsing in, pressing into an atom. Low pressure ether spreading out to the universe. So really the universe itself in its totality is infinite low pressure spreading out. But it must be infinite because it's spreading out to infinity. So the ultimate universe is infinite. But infinite must also be a sphere. The infinite universe will also have this geometry. Because infinity goes out in all directions the same amount. If I go off to infinity in any direction, it will be the same. So around me, it will be a sphere. We cannot express infinity, but a sphere will represent infinity. So the universe in its totality of this diffuse ether will be a sphere. Now that's not a soul so much as the totality of consciousness. So you can think of the universe in its totality as a single soul, an ATMA, consciousness. One consciousness, the whole universe. And it's a sphere, but it's an infinite sphere of low density ether. But an atom is that ether compacting, and sometimes it compacts to its absolute limit. It's the limited ability to compact. It reaches the limit. It cannot compact anymore, and it gets trapped in a bubble and creates an atom. A tiny little sphere. So we've got a big sphere here, that's the universe, and a small sphere here, that's an atom. Now, so we can say the soul, the Atma, is the totality of the universe, an infinite sphere. But the atom is a tiny little individual sphere, material substance. But we, as living beings, are individual souls. I can't say that I am the totality of the universe, but I can say that my consciousness is part of the totality of the universe. So all our consciousnesses must be part of the totality of the whole universe. And people are saying that now, all consciousness is connected. We're all just one consciousness energy. But we're having an individual experience. Just like an atom, now this is made of atoms. These atoms are now separate from these atoms. There's a separation. Now, we are consciousness, made of the same consciousness, but you and me are two separate beings now. We have a separation. And the separation is again created. How is that created? Well, I would say it like this. The pure infinite consciousness, the infinite universe, is again an infinite sphere. Well, let's go back. Look at the creation of an atom. If an atom is created by high density ether compacting inwards, a soul, a personal soul like me, an Atma, will also be created by ether compacting inwards. But the ultimate diffuse ether of the universe is the most lowest density that will compact a little bit. It compacts a little bit, just enough to create a singularity of consciousness. So how is that formed? What creates that? Well, again, how is ether increasing in density? How does it increase in density? Well, there must be movements happening. Things must be happening. And as movements happening in the ether, you'll get these movements, spirals. It has to be like that because a spiral is a movement that is increasing in density. So we will have spirals in the ether created. And a converging spiral of the ether will first create an individual consciousness, an Atma. But an Atma is still very diffuse ether. It's not physically observable. It is, but it's so diffuse we don't know how to observe it. But that's still ether, very diffuse ether, but ether compacted into an individual soul, an Atma. And then further on, that ether, the soul, can also compact further. More vortexes, more spirals of ether compact further and further and further down until it compacts into energy, light. But light will compact further and further and further down until it gets to an atom. So if you look at it this way, the ether, the totality of the universe, is pure fluid of varying densities. But these varying densities have movements, and they create spiraling movements. And spiraling movements, moving around, interacting, create all these different plays of density, different fluid dynamics. And that is how the universe manifests. We have consciousness up on one level, and we have atoms down at another level. It's still the same energy, and they will interact. They will move between this. You see, the atoms are the same energy, and it's the same energy that create this body. This body is created of atoms, but I am a consciousness. I'm a consciousness controlling these atoms. How does my consciousness, my soul, control these atoms? Well, my consciousness, my soul, is still ether, but it is more diffuse ether. These atoms are more condensed ether. But the more diffuse ether of my soul is creating spirals, movements. Very subtle. But these spiral movements of ether are affecting the tighter atoms in this body. So movements of ether affect each other. So my soul, my consciousness creates movements of ether that condenses and affects this physical body. So put it very simply, consciousness is ether, very subtle ether. But this creates movements, and these movements can still affect lower, denser ether. Say this physical light here, this is light, energy. This light, I can't feel it, but we know it's something here, but this light is still, it's still diffuse compared to this. But there's an interaction, we've got an interaction. My consciousness is here, even more diffuse than light. But my consciousness will still affect this light, and this light will still affect these atoms. Look at it like this. I create a vortex of ether in consciousness. That can create a vortex of light, which is still ether. A vortex of light condenses into tiny vortexes, which become atoms. Same energy. Again, very difficult to wrap your head around this, and I'm going to be talking about this more and more. I'm always trying to simplify my theory. And I've already got two video series talking about it. My first series is called Magical Science, where I'm trying to explain a holistic model of the universe. Explain everything, how atoms build up, what the ether is, interaction of consciousness and matter. But then the second series is called Ether Physics, which this is part of. Again, I've tried again to explain it in more detail. But I'm going to start a third series soon, where I'm going to take it to another level of simplification. This should be simple. We should all be able to understand it. Again, a unified, convergent science. All branches of science come together into one science, the science of ether. And it includes consciousness, it includes energy, it includes atoms, everything. So it will include mechanics, it will include electromagnetics, it will include gravity, everything. It will include alien technology, it will include ancient technology. All technologies, all science, every phenomena should be able to be explained with one holistic science, ether physics. It must be so. It must be so. And if we are consciousness, and the entire universe is made up of consciousness, consciousness means understanding. Again, it's a phenomenal proof. The fact that we can understand something, that is proof of metaphysics. Understanding, what is understanding? It's only a function of consciousness. There's no understanding in material substance. There's no understanding in this body. The understanding happens in the soul. It's a subjective experience. Totally subjective, Boof, oh, I understand. Yeah, what do you understand? Prove it. You have to prove it. But understanding is provable. That makes it objective. Subjective becomes objective. How is understanding provable? It's provable through logical deduction or retroduction. It's provable through mathematics. You have to prove your understanding step by step. Then someone else can look at it and say, oh yeah, that is true. That's metaphysics. The only way to prove metaphysics, understanding, is through retroduction, logical explanation. Because it has we can't detect it physically. Now, even Tesla has said this. Tesla is quoted to say this: the moment modern science tries to understand or tries to explain the non-physical, that is the moment where we're actually going to get somewhere. So the moment, like I said, modern science is just governed by money, engineering, it's divergent. Yeah, I can look at this. I don't care what's going on. How can I make money? Trying to understand what's going on, difficult to make money, so I don't care about that. But if they were to look at the non-physical, consciousness is not physical, we can't detect it. But consciousness is undeniable. The moment we look at that, we're going to have a convergent science, a holistic science. This will be the ether. So I hope this made sense. I want to point out today that it was the case. The ATMA and the atom. The ancients knew this. Why did they call it the atom? They already had the ATMA, so they called it the atom. They go together. It's all the same science. And it's all built on geometry. The ATMA is a sphere. The atom is a sphere. It has to become a sphere because that is the most efficient geometry for space. It's about efficiency and geometry, which are both mathematics. They're abstract, not physical. So I hope this made sense. Thank you again so much for listening. Please do leave me any questions or comments, and I hope to see you in any of these other videos here.